Rhonda, I rewatched the debate because I love it so. I love politics so much. I had to relive it all over again. And, it's not.
Libby, we need to get you in hobby.
I know. It's true.
We will never give up. We will never concede. We'll be bigger, better, and bolder than ever before.
We are not going back.
Welcome to Sidebar from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey. I'm joined today by Rhonda Colvin and James Hohmann, who are here in the studio with me. And we're also joined by Senior Critic-at-Large Robin Givhan. Welcome, Robin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we're together less than 48 hours after the first and maybe only presidential debate between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. And the first votes of the 2024 general election will be cast in just 4 days. That's right, early voting starts Monday in the key swing state of Pennsylvania. So on today's show, we'll talk about what all those big moments at Tuesday's debate mean for the rest of the campaign as November looms. And later, we'll get into why the state that hosted the debate, Pennsylvania, could be the one that decides the presidency in November. Plus, look what he made her do. I had to do it, guys. Taylor Swift's endorsement of Vice President Harris happened moments after Tuesday's debate ended. Taylor Swift wrote online that she decided to do it after realizing that a fake AI image of her falsely endorsing Trump was posted to his website. So her post so far has more than 10.3 million likes on Instagram. But what do celebrity endorsements amount to? And is this one of the most meaningful? We'll look at the power of celebrity. Let's begin with the moments that everyone's talking about from Tuesday's debate. We went into this wondering how these two candidates would handle each other. And there was so much focus on Kamala Harris and defining Kamala Harris. But I have found that a lot of what we're talking about is actually Donald Trump. Do you find that to be the case, James?
Yeah, totally. I thought it would be about both sides trying to define Harris.
Yeah.
Harris introducing herself to a lot of people who don't feel like they know her well. Trump trying to define Harris as really liberal or as a flip-flopper. But instead, it really was a debate about Trump. And it feels like an election about Trump. And if it's a referendum on Donald Trump, I think he probably loses that election.
Rhonda.
Well, since Trump has entered the political sphere, a lot always ends to be about him. Just everything.
It's like a magnet.
He sucks up the oxygen.
Exactly.
In the room.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm not surprised that we're talking about him and his performance. I figured he would have a one-liner that everyone is talking about. I didn't know it would be about pets, but I knew there would be something. So, and then also, and this is probably just my, observations as a reporter, I've watched Harris since she has been in Washington. I rewatched some of her debates, even her statewide debates, and I knew she would probably come in very well prepared. And we also know that because she was in a hotel room in Pittsburgh, having mock debates, doing some of the conventional ways that candidates prepare for debates. So I knew she would come in very prepared. But again, I think we can't really be surprised that everything's about Trump because it often is in the end.
Well, that's such a good point. As usual, Rhonda has the wisdom. She's like, I kind of thought it might turn out this way. So, Robin, you can over-prepare for a debate and you can get inside your own head. And so just because Kamala Harris had very well prepared didn't necessarily mean that she would emerge as someone who could seem self-possessed, be in control, and successfully bait Donald Trump into stepping in his own trap over and over again. How did she define herself on Tuesday night?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that it's really easy to sort of consume so much information that it all just kind of becomes a muddle in your head. But it seemed to me that the really smart thing that she did was not just to prepare herself with the facts, but to prepare herself psychologically. I mean, the whole thing to me was sort of this psychodrama in a way. And, I think a lot of times you sort of, or at least for me, I'm looking at and listening to how Trump is responding and sort of taking the bait, as you said. And I'm thinking, if he is so easily doing that now when he should have very well have been prepared that this was something that was going to be attempted, to get him to take the bait, how is he going to perform when he's actually dealing with world leaders? And I think that was kind of the part of it that was so fascinating to me, that he so easily was unable to control himself And she, I thought, spoke volumes with one single expression, which was her hand under her chin. I mean, I thought that was worth 10 minutes of speechifying.
Let's watch that moment. If you're listening to us as a podcast, we'll describe what's happening. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see it yourself. But let's get a sense of how Kamala Harris was reacting to Donald Trump with that gesture that Robin was talking about.
The people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies.
Okay, so Kamala Harris, her eyes got wide, and then she just put her hand under her chin and looked over at Donald Trump, Robin.
Right. We all know that gesture. We have probably gotten that expression from a parent who is looking incredulously at a child who is trying to sort of dig their way out of some trouble they've gotten into. They have probably seen that expression from a teacher who is listening to someone explain why the homework didn't get done, or from a friend who is listening as you're telling some giant, fish story. So I think that expression was so universal and it was so real, because in that moment, I think a lot of people at home were sort of taken aback by what Trump was actually saying. And it also, I thought, had the effect of doing what her campaign has been trying to do for so long, which is to characterize him as so much of what he's saying as weird and unserious. And while not being completely dismissive, it really diminished him and made him look small.
Let's watch another moment where Kamala Harris is just laughing at what Donald Trump is saying. So he's talking and she just looks and gives this full face smile and laughs and throws her hands up. Like, what is he talking about, Rhonda?
Yeah, it underscores that she's finding it absurd, and many viewers as well, especially her supporters, are also probably finding things absurd. I know we're right now in the thick of things, the fog of war of this election, but I think when history, discusses this debate or this election, I really think body language is going to be a key moment, a defining moment really in this election, because I think Harris knew exactly what she was doing. She's very aware what side of the stage she was on. She chose to be on stage left, which would have been the right, on the right side of the screen for viewers. I know she knew that the camera was on her and that these moments would be picked up. And I also, again, because I studied some of her debates in the past, she does this with her other opponents as well. And then it also underscores the fact that she is a prosecutor, or at least has that background professionally. And that is the type of profession where you have to know your audience. You have to know how to appeal to people, and you have to know how to tell a story, whether that's in words or body language, to the jury and get them to believe what you're saying. So I think that was really a part of her prep, that she knew her opponent. She knows him well.
I hadn't thought about that, Rhonda. I thought about the role of a prosecutor as sort of being stern and like hitting your points. But there's this other performative aspect of warmth and winning over a jury and having to seem likable. Big key word in politics, right?
Think of all the court cases we have found ourselves covering the last few years and watching closing statements. It is very performative, and I think that was something she was able to bring to her prep.
One of the takeaways.
Sorry. No, please go ahead, Robin. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to add to what Rhonda was saying. And one of the things that really struck me was that in many instances, Kamala Harris was looking directly into the camera and she was speaking to people at home. She was speaking to viewers, or, a prosecutor speaking directly to the jury. And Trump, I couldn't figure out if he was his gaze was tilted downward because of his height, or because he had simply forgotten that there was a television audience that he should have been at some point trying to address. But he spent a lot of time looking down at the moderators and yelling at them.
And the moderators ultimately were not the audience. Let's just watch some footage of how Trump was reacting as Kamala Harris is speaking. So as Kamala Harris is talking, Donald Trump, and it's a side shot, so we can see him in the foreground, her in the background, and he's just has this scowl on his face. He's just looking, a little bit down, but ahead and down, and not reacting to her personally? Like, one thing I noticed, Robin, is that he almost acted like she wasn't even there. Like, he didn't engage with her. He didn't look over at her. He didn't use her name. What do you make of that?
Well, I think you saw that from the very beginning, right? When they both walked on stage and she walked over into his space, to his side of the stage, and extended her hand and introduced herself by name. As obviously he knew who she was, but she specifically introduced herself by name, perhaps to remind him of how to actually pronounce her first name.
Good point.
And he looked a little surprised that she sort of had the nerve to come, the audacity, the nerve, the courage to come over directly to him. I don't think there would have been a handshake had she not initiated it.
Yeah. And, so much of the narrative around Trump is that he is unpredictable. And this debate shows that he, in fact, is very predictable because the Harris folks spent 5 days in a Pittsburgh hotel preparing. And as we've talked about, you can over-prepare and you can prepare the wrong way. You can prepare for the wrong Trump. And there's lots of examples in presidential debate history where, in 1996, Jack Kemp was preparing to debate Al Gore, and his Al Gore stand-in was this kind of cartoonishly liberal Al Gore. And then when Gore came on stage and was a moderate, Kemp was totally thrown off because he didn't prepare for that, right? And in this case, the Harris folks knew they would be able to get under Trump's skin. Trump can't help but react when you say something that gets to his ego. And
like what?
Like she did that with crowd sizes and people leaving his events early. She did that with John McCain. She did that
with people
you were
who-
fired.
Yeah,
you were fired. You were fired by 81 million people. And Trump was trying to keep a straight face, but it was clearly getting under his skin. And even on issues like immigration, where he has a big polling advantage, he ends up, instead of making his argument about the border, talking about how people actually don't leave his rallies early and that they're the best rallies in the history of politics. And I think we have some tape of it.
Yeah, let's roll some examples of how Harris was so successfully able to bait Donald Trump.
You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
The late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. At number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years.
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that.
You talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think
up.
we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
It's like a masterclass in baiting someone. I honestly did not think it would be that easy.
I didn't either. And notice that she didn't take the bait. In that final clip, he's saying, you didn't get any votes in the primaries. You dropped out early. And Harris is completely unperturbed by that. She doesn't get off message. She doesn't get sidetracked. He always does. There was not a single moment where a Harris campaign person described it to me yesterday as laying an Easter egg. That she had all these Easter eggs planned that she was putting in her answers to get him to kind of like chase the ball. And she never did.
Rhonda, I rewatched the debate because I love it I love politics so much. I had to relive it all over again. And, it's not...
Libby, we need to get you in hobby.
I know. It's true. Maybe in December, I'll find a hobby. So I watched again, and they both got tough questions. Like Harris got tough questions. Trump got tough questions, pointed questions about Harris, changing her policy positions. And the thing was that she did a little answer and then pivoted away, dropped those Easter eggs for Donald Trump. And so when it went to him, he had the chance to follow up and say, Let me make some points on immigration. Let me make some points on abortion, whatever. He couldn't do it. He didn't have the discipline. And so it felt almost like she wasn't being given tough questions because she was so artfully dodging around them.
That's right. I think that that's a fair assessment of it. I actually went back to my notes that I typed as the debate was happening in real time. And the comment about crowd sizes, that was weaved in. I love the Easter egg analogy. That was weaved into a discussion about the border. So she knew to talk about something with substance, answer the question, but also just weave in just a little bit, something she knew would bother him. And then also, the line that I'm sure we might talk about a little later about pets and dogs and cats, that came also during a time when they were talking about the border. So, what we're hearing from Republicans right now is that Trump missed a lot of opportunities. I've heard that phrase so many times in the last 48 hours that there was an opportunity to go after her in areas that might be deemed vulnerable for her. But because she did this in a very masterful way of just dropping a little line that she knew that would get to him, crowd sizes, being fired, and then he would pivot. He would not answer the question. He would not use his time to redirect back to the border. He would use it to, say, oh, no, they're staying at my rallies. And that is what people remember. And that is what she knew people would remember at the end of the debate.
In the immediate aftermath, Robin, James said, and J.M. Rieger said, it's a night of missed opportunities for Donald Trump. And I think you guys were right. Like, I think that that's part of this story is that he wasted his time. He missed the opportunities. What are your thoughts on how he chose to spend his time, Robin?
Well, it seemed like he had one point that he wanted to make, which was really all about immigration. And so every time she, avoided a question or sort of glanced over a question, he would pivot to the topic of immigration, but he would also get defensive about whatever as Easter egg had gotten under his skin. And I think, it was definitely true that there were missed opportunities, but it also seemed like he was so focused on, speaking of body language, sort of presenting himself as the tough guy that is so much a part of his brand that, he came across as just a very angry person who just got angrier every time she got under his skin. And then when he got on the subject of immigration, all of that anger just seemed to explode in this sort of crazy talk about refugees eating cats and dogs and just really falling prey to whatever the last crazy thing he was that he'd seen on social media. And so I was just kind of struck by how his inability to move outside of this one note of emotion, which is anger, really seemed to be part of what was his downfall.
Let's listen to the clip that has been now heard around the world about eating pets.
Just to go into another subject, what they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Kamala Harris is reacting in real time and laughing, shaking her head, looking confused and saying like, oh, come on, and unbelievable, right? So she's giving this reaction to him that perhaps others were sharing.
I just, because to tack on, because this encapsulates it. Robin's so right that Trump had one note, anger. And when you watch some of his debates for 2016, he could be funny. He was angry then, but he had a little more range. Now every answer is just angry. And Harris, what we're seeing with the body language in her answers is real range. She can sort of pity him. She can laugh at him. She can dismiss him with humor, but also make, as you were saying, like a very forceful prosecutorial case against him. And she was able to hit a bunch of notes. That he just had that one note that he kept hitting on the piano.
So one of the primary goals, besides talking about immigration, was to try to tie and saddle Kamala Harris to the Biden legacy, the Biden administration. And we heard a clip earlier where he says Biden doesn't even like Kamala Harris. So even there, he got stuck in his own sort of vitriol and frustration. And that's certainly not tying the two of them lockstep together. Robin, you've been thinking a lot and writing about what it means to look presidential and be presidential. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, part of me just sort of wondered what that really even means, right? I mean, it seems like it's so nebulous, and it also just sort of seems like this idea that doesn't really have a meaning unless you actually have the office of the presidency behind you, because that's really what sort of provides that stature. And so initially I thought, okay, well, maybe it really means, coming out and being able to command a stage and hold people's attention. They used to say that, Bill Clinton entered a room and he could sort of suck all the oxygen out of the room and all eyes turned to him. But, and I think that for Trump, the idea of what looks presidential is toughness. But I think what Kamala Harris showed is that in this moment, looking presidential was really about being a kind of representative for the average person who was watching that debate, because so many of her responses, so much of her body language seemed to me to be very much sort of, every person kind of body language. I mean, she had the range of emotions. And, I don't know if that means that the notion of what looks presidential has changed. But I think it was smart on her part, because everything about her is not what we have grown accustomed to seeing when we think about someone who looks presidential. So I thought it was sort of smart that she didn't even sort of play into all those cliches and tropes and the traditions of what we think that looking presidential means.
It's like rewriting the playbook, rewriting the guidelines. Rhonda, you were there in Philadelphia. What was it like in the room in terms of reaction when Trump said some of those things like eating pets, which I mean, do I have to say it? There's no evidence that anyone is eating pets in Springfield,
Ohio. Can I just ask,
please, yes. Yeah.
How did ABC News moderators know to actually fact check that in advance so that they could say, well, we called the city manager and there have been no pets?
They were really prepared, weren't they?
Yeah, I think that, because it had been ricocheting around the internet. Like, it was a thing on the internet. And so I think a lot of us were like head scratch. And the basic 101 rule, right, is like pick up the phone and make the call. Like, you call the city manager. And so ABC, like the Washington Post, like did that to be like, hey, any reports of people's pets being stolen and consumed by other humans, right? And so it was quite convenient that David Muir had that ready to go. But you're right. He had his 5 fact check things, and that was one of them right there. Yeah,
that's funny. Actually, probably 2 hours before I went over to the spin room, I read the story. So I'm glad I did, because I
from ABC.
I read the story about the dogs and the cats in Springfield, Ohio, and I'm like, okay, this is strange. But I remember filing it away, and so I think, to your point, that story was circulating for a few days before the debate. And it just also shows you that the journalists at ABC News were prepared. They were probably in their own prep meetings. Okay, what will be the thing that comes up? What do we need to be prepared to push back on if we need to do fact checking? So I really think the fact that they were ready with that one, that was really key. But from your first question about how it felt in the spin room when that moment happened, you heard a lot of laughs, but they were almost laughs of just like, okay, where is this going? Just that absurdity. I remember even one of our colleagues who was at my table, he did not know the story, and he just thought Trump was really having a moment, because he was thinking, where is this coming from? So it was just one of those moments where I think in real time, you're digesting something that everybody will be talking about soon, but you're just wondering how also are we here right now? How is this the moment from a presidential debate that we're talking about pets and, cats and dogs, and just, sort of a xenophobic dog whistle, really.
Literal dog whistle.
Right. I mean, it just also shows you where our politics are right now, that we these are the things that we are left talking about. These are the things that voters who I spoke with in the Philadelphia area the day after, it was the first thing they brought up without me even having to ask it.
Wow.
Oh, everyone was talking about the dogs and cats.
That's so interesting. See,
Yeah.
I saw it and I was kind of like, okay, it's more of like, because I've been watching all the memes online, like Republicans were like sharing all these memes of like Trump saving cats and things like that. I was sort of like, okay, like this is, maybe I'm become numb to it, but I didn't realize it would be such a viral moment.
Maybe I've become cynical, but I fear, even though it's obviously crazy and false, that, you know, it's so memorable. And like Trump has put this idea into the ether, and it is a dog whistle.
Yeah, please go more into that, because we're laughing, but it's dangerous.
And it is, I think, you know, like the what he's speaking to is fear of change, fear of migration,
fear of non-white people,
of the other. And, you know, there's a lot of people who have those fears, and, you know, you sort of worry that, that it captures someone's imagination. And it's one of those things where it's like, we laugh about it for good reason, but then there's like some segment of the electorate that's like, Trump actually is trying to do something about this, you know, which is clearly an imagined problem, but that does speak to something that is an authentic concern, which is like, you know, this town of Springfield, Ohio has had thousands of Haitian immigrants show up in a relatively small town, and that has taxed public services and had an impact in the schools and created tensions between the white residents and the Haitian residents. And that, like, Trump in his own cynical way is actually like memorably, you know, rubbing this wound of racism.
Yeah.
Which he's really excellent at doing. I mean, there's so many, it's like he gets into like the id of all of our brains, right? With, I mean, even if you scoff at or laugh at the mocking nicknames he has for people, and you remember them, right? They stick. It's very sticky. Trump is a master of sticky content. James, what do you see in the polls? What are people interpreting in terms of winners, losers, success of the debate?
So, you know, there were the post-debate instant polls. CNN showed that 63% thought Harris won, 37% thought Trump won. After the first debate in June, the same CNN poll showed 67% thought Trump won, 33% thought Biden won. There was also a YouGov instant poll that showed Harris won 54-31. After the first debate, it showed Trump won 43-22. Now, that's a lot of numbers. We haven't gotten a big kind of quality national poll, but what we have seen is various dial tests, focus groups, and what they're showing is that Harris's favorability improved. In a statistically significant way. More people view Harris positively after the debate than before. Trump's, even though he clearly lost the debate, has stayed about the same. It's not like it took a big hit. And I think part of that is that people love Trump or hate Trump, but they feel like they know Trump, and they feel like, you know, the buffoonish version of Trump. It's I think, like, it's sort of priced in some ways. It's not like, oh, wow, we had no idea that Donald Trump was like this. It's sort of, it is what you think
priced in is a good way to put it. So, Robin, you know, we're talking about this debate in terms of the skills that Kamala Harris showed, how successful she was at various things. But I don't want people to think that this is like Team Kamala Harris, right? It's just that we're talking about and analyzing the body language of the debate, the success of a debate. This is a moment in time. This is not to say she's going to win the election. This is not to say if they have another debate that she'll be able to bait Trump as successfully, although track record would show that it's not too hard with her skill set. Robin, who are these people who think Trump won the debate, though? Because I don't put politics aside. There's just the basic, like, success of the moment. How do you have thoughts on this?
I have no idea who these people could possibly be. I'm like, what debate did you watch? You know, my only thought is that, you know, these are people for whom Trump was doing what they wanted him to do, which is to sort of channel this rage and anger and fear about, you know, as has been said, about immigration, about change, about people who are not white, about people who are not straight, about people who are, you know, sort of don't fit into this sort of stereotypical category of what is feminine and what is masculine and all of those kinds of things. I mean, unless if that's what you wanted, if that's what you need, I think, from a president, then Trump gave them that. But, I think it speaks volumes that he was able to go in depth about dogs and cats being consumed. And yet when he was asked about healthcare and the Affordable Care Act, he sort of had this meandering response about concepts of plans. So clearly the idea of like substance wasn't really something that they were judging the debate on. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, Kamala Harris was light on some details about things that they tried to press her on, right? She didn't really have a clear history to tell or a story to tell about fracking or, go right ahead. Yeah.
The first question about the economy and whether or not you were better off than you were. She didn't really answer that question. And on the fracking question, there were, other things about changes that she's made in, her viewpoints that she said, I'm going to get to all of those. And she never got to all of those.
But Donald Trump didn't have the focus to hold her accountable, right? Like he didn't have the ability to turn the spotlight back on that and bring the conversation back to that. And so that's one of the reasons why Harris came out on top, in my humble opinion, in the debate. I am curious to see the breakdown of men versus women, though.
So there was a big
I do think that.
Yeah, no, and also what I was struck by in talking yesterday to various Democrats and Republicans who were involved in the campaign is this Democratic group that was message testing all of Harris's lines and was doing dial groups. So if you like the line or turn it up or down, and the Harris line that Blueprint, which is this Democratic group that's funded by Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, they said that the most effective Harris line was when she said, "I am not Joe Biden." When she tried to, when he was saying you are the failed policies, and it gets at this idea that she's trying to be both a change agent, she's talking about a new beginning and turning the page on Donald Trump, but also is the sitting vice president, which is why, that are you better off than you were 4 years ago question is difficult. And a lot of voters, I think, obviously on the surface, she's not Joe Biden, but the way she said it made clear without her sort of saying, I disagree with Biden on issues X, Y, and Z, that she is a different public servant than Joe Biden is, and that she'd govern differently and will approach problems differently. She's obviously more than 20 years younger than him, is of a different generation.
She also said, I'm not Donald Trump.
Right.
It was like a twofer. It was like, and it's this idea of trying to paint yourself as the change agent.
Yeah, exactly. I keep thinking back to, and I guess it was advantageous for her. Remember back when Biden was elected and we heard from some of our White House reporters and inside the camp that she was struggling, that he wasn't giving her anything that would help her stand out. And, vice presidents that's a hard job because you can't really overshadow the president, but she had a portfolio that seemed, impossible. She wasn't able to have the type of moments she had on the Hill when she had, front and center moments between Trump's picks for different cabinet positions and how she, prepared well for those hearings. So she wasn't able to break through and be her own person. But now that's working to her advantage because she can say things like, I'm not Joe Biden, but she can also leave people with the impression that she is a fresh face. Whether it's Biden or Trump, she is a fresh person, that change agent. So it actually worked for her that she wasn't defined early, that people are now tuning in to find more about her when we're now just weeks from the election.
Robin, final question from you. How does this set these two candidates up in your mind going into this sprint to Election Day?
Sadly, I don't know that it necessarily changed very much. Because, going back to the whole idea of body language and temperament, Trump has been selling himself as the tough guy. He admires strong men and authoritarians. And that's how he came across during that debate. And Kamala Harris's campaign has been leaning into this idea of joy and, nuance and sort of a positive spin. And, and I think that's what she displayed. She looked like a happy person. a serious person, but a happy person. And so I think they sort of just did more of what they have already been doing.
Thank you so much, Robin Givhan, Senior Critic-at-Large for the Washington Post. Great to hear your voice. And if you're joining us on YouTube, seeing Robin in person. Great to see you, Robin. Everybody else, stay with us. We're going to talk about the key state of Pennsylvania, where Rhonda just got back from. She talked to voters there. We'll hear what's on their minds. And coming up soon, celebrity endorsements. How much do they matter? Stick around. This is Sidebar from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey, and still with me are James Hohmann and Rhonda Colvin. Rhonda just got back from Pennsylvania, a crucial state.
The crucial state.
Yeah, it's my hometown state. So go Pennsylvania! Our moment in the spotlight. I want to play for you some tape from the debate, which I wrote down specifically, like the time code at which it happened, because it was like such a blatant appeal to the Pennsylvanians in the audience. Let's roll the tape from Tuesday night's ABC News debate.
Starting with Poland, and why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
This is a discussion of foreign policy. Kamala Harris trying to hold Donald Trump accountable for his comments on Ukraine and whether or not he would support Ukraine's struggle against the Russian incursion. A lot of Polish Americans in Pennsylvania, Rhonda.
Yeah. And that, again, is her, artfulness of trying to appeal to voters she knows she will need in order to win.
And make it feel personal and more local, because foreign policy
and that
is
she's
such
in touch.
but foreign policy, it's like it's so
It
literally
feels so
far
abstract,
away.
And to bring it home and to talk about how foreign policy affects you in America, and your life.
Yeah, exactly. And, being in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania for 48 hours? Was it longer?
It's never long enough.
Never long enough.
I tried
to get awake probably for 45 of those hours.
That is
so it's
very
it's
true.
Like being
very
there for
true.
more than just 2 days.
Very true. I kind of still feel like I am there. I did a lot of walking around the downtown area, specifically around where the debate was held. We were in a separate area in the convention center.
The journalists.
Journalists, yes. But in the morning hours, I wanted to get sort of the vibe of Pennsylvania in that area. You can definitely tell that Pennsylvania is very aware of the role that they play, and that politicians are very aware of that role too. I noticed a lot of, mobile billboards that were for or against Trump, for or against Harris. There were billboards outside of the convention center from the Harris team talking about crowd size, another dig at Trump.
Right. Weren't they like soft pretzels?
They were soft pretzels.
A small one for Trump and a big one for Harris, right?
Exactly. And it said crowd size matters. And it was huge. And it was right in the entrance, toward the entrance of the convention center. But the other thing that I also noticed too, and this is likely happening, statewide, because Philadelphia, that is a blue area, but statewide, you are reminded that these places are just inundated with ads. Just watching television was just like, every ad was for the election.
So it's like ads with a little bit of programming squeezed in and then ads, basically.
And they were also ads, and I've been traveling a lot, this cycle. These were also ads I have not seen before. I saw ones for Harris that were voters who were former Republicans and just speaking directly to camera, saying that they are voting for her and here's why. There were a lot of, Republican ads. I saw one that dealt with guns and saying that Harris was going to take your guns away. Also, the down ballot races, that's going to be incredibly important. There were so many, Bob Casey, who's the incumbent senator right now, against Dave McCormick, so many ads for and against both of them. So that Pennsylvania right now, a lot of people may not even want to watch the TV or pick up their phone. They are getting really targeted right now. So
I want to hear more about what people told you about their reactions to the debate and how they're feeling about the election. But James, put Pennsylvania in perspective for us. Why is this such a crucial state?
There's really no path to victory honestly, for either without Pennsylvania. So
how can that be true?
Let's
just give up and only have Pennsylvania
I know, exactly.
vote.
Just all, and if you look at the ad reservations, it's like Trump has reserved $80 million in ad buys between now and the election, and the next closest state is Georgia, and it's like 17 million. I mean, it's like 4x as much. And, you know, both the fact that Kamala Harris prepared for the debate in Pittsburgh, I thought was very interesting. And then went back the day after the debate for a 9/11 commemoration event where Flight 93 went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, in sort of the central part of the state. And to your point, you know, Philadelphia is the, especially, you know, center city Philadelphia, that is blue. Traditionally, the suburbs, the main line, that was a Republican area. And there's been this realignment in the state where those were, you know, Mitt Romney voters in 2012. Now, those suburban voters have become much more Democratic, but then the rural voters have become much more Republican and Trumpy, even though, you know, they were Bob Casey, you know, they loved Bob Casey's dad.
Who was the governor.
And so there is this realignment.
No
no relation.
Although I was often asked when I was a kid if I was related to the governor, and it was very tempting to say yes.
One of my college professors, his last name is Kennedy, and he studied abroad. He was in college in the 50s, and he studied abroad in 1960 in Italy. And he said that, you know, all the Italians would always ask, "Are you related to Kennedy?" And he would say yes, because
much less scrupulous
than you're much more scrupulous though. And they like it's Pennsylvania is 19 electoral votes. You know, it's the biggest prize of the true swing states. You know, you add up everything else, like it really does come down to Pennsylvania. And it's a state that, you know, Trump obviously won in 2016 unexpectedly. And it really is a state that plays to some of his strengths. And Western Pennsylvania, with the fracking stuff we've talked about, white working class, you know, Trump has some appeal there. He's able to really excite people in the rural parts of the state. And so I think part of it is that it's so close and that it really could be won by either side. And it's a big enough prize that you really need it.
We're going to see not just ads there, but the candidates will be there a lot in the next 2 months. So Rhonda, what did voters tell you, or people who watched the debate? What were their takeaways?
Yeah, and I'll also add this too to what James was saying. And I looked up this statistic on the day of the debate and didn't get to share it with everyone. But Pennsylvania, yes, I know. All the notes we never can share.
Make air.
But I thought it was even historically interesting because Pennsylvania has such a track record for being a decisive state. They have picked the eventual winner of every presidential election since 1972 in the modern elections. And they have overall, since they've been a state, they have picked the eventual winner 80% of the time. So their track record is pretty strong. And you know, that it also shows you that that type of state is almost a microcosm for the rest of the country. You know, they do have places like Philadelphia that's metropolitan. You've got the rural areas. You've got working class up in the northern part of the state. You know, you also have influences of the states that are around them. You know, they are close to New York City, New Jersey, Maryland as well. So it is an interesting state, but historically, they do have a very strong track record of picking the eventual winner. So.
I think there's like a stat I saw that like no Democrat has won the presidency without Pennsylvania in like more than 100 years.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, Rhonda and James are not running for office in Pennsylvania.
And we don't work for
the tourism board.
Despite
I'm not sure. Well, you're not selling it. All political ads all the time.
I know. Don't turn on your TV.
So what did people tell you?
You know, what I did find is that we had a lot of people that we stopped and asked if they would tell us what they thought about the debate. A lot of people didn't catch it in its entirety. A lot of people rely on, right. They rely, you know, and it was a school night, a work night, you know, people go to bed early. A lot of people said they got the headlines, but they didn't watch it. Those who did watch it, a lot of them already had their decisions made. I talked to a Harris person who said she already wanted to vote for Harris, but she felt even better after the debate. She said she even immediately gave a donation because she felt that good.
That's interesting. Like,
it is.
Who does it activate? Yeah.
Right, exactly. I talked to a Republican voter. He was an immigrant, and he said he just feels it's not really about Trump anymore, whether Trump won or lost. It's that he's going to vote for the Republican Party. And you probably have a lot of Republicans saying it or spinning it that way, that, oh, despite what he did or said, I'm just voting with the party. The cat and dog story, that really, even without prompting, people brought that up. I think a lot of people, even Republicans, were a bit disturbed that he said that and that it was quickly debunked by the moderators. So
what was there? Were they were disturbed that he brought it up? Like they thought it was weird?
They thought it was weird.
Yeah.
They thought it was bizarre.
Were they grateful the moderators cleared it up, or did they think the moderators were injecting themselves into the debate?
You know, they didn't really talk about the moderators.
But they were like, oh, but it's not true because the moderators said it's not.
I think they just thought it was such a bizarre thing to say that it overshadowed anything else in the debate. And I think, and again, to what we said earlier, it was a part of Harris's strategy to have those moments that she could replay or that would replay in people's mind that show she is different from Trump. And I also couldn't believe that was the one thing everybody remembered, but it's something that really sticks. But yeah, I remember it was an older woman who talked to us and she gave us her opinion and then she walked away from her camera and then she turned around and she's like, and another thing, I don't want him to be my last president. And she said she's up in age and she said, I don't want him to be my last president. I don't know if I'm going to have any other opportunities to vote. And I thought that even gives you a glimpse into how people who are looking just at the moment of this election, whether it's women who may want to see a woman president, whether it's, Black or Southeast Asian folks who may look at this and say this is a historic moment for them. There are also other people who are looking at this and wondering what happens to the country under another term of Donald Trump.
It's been a moment for cats and dogs and also childless cat ladies. So we'll talk about one of the most influential childless cat ladies in the world in just a moment, the endorsement of Taylor Swift, and just how much celebrity endorsements are worth. Stay with us. This is Sidebar from the Washington Post. Celebrity endorsements, just what are they worth? It was really moments after the debate ended that Taylor Swift went on Instagram to say that she is supporting Kamala Harris. And the post has gotten over 10 million likes. And very interesting, she put a link in there to click to learn more about voter registration. And almost 338,000 people had clicked her link to voter registration information by Wednesday at 2:00. So less than 24 hours later, like 15 hours after the debate ended. She signed it, Childless Cat Lady. There's the picture if you're watching with us on YouTube. If you were listening to the podcast, well, you've probably already seen it because it was really like breaking news. James, you've done a lot of research for us about celebrity endorsements. You came in with like a binder full of celebrities. How much are these endorsements worth?
Well, it really depends. Taylor's fans were ready for it. I had to do that as well.
We're going to see how many. Okay, this is the Easter egg, right? How many Taylor Swift songs can we weave into this segment?
She has 283 million Instagram followers.
Wait, say that number again.
283 million, more people than, obviously not all are in the United States, but more people than
or
vote by
age.
far. Or voting age.
Great point.
And, it is sort of mind-blowing, the numbers. And I think it was sort of priced in, to use the term we used earlier. People knew Taylor Swift. She endorsed Joe Biden in 2020. She has sort of taken some liberal policy positions. In 2018, she endorsed Phil Bredesen for Tennessee Senate. He lost pretty badly to Marsha Blackburn, the Republican. And so obviously there are limits. I think the voter registration piece is really important. There have been endorsements in history that really mattered. I looked into the history of some of these celebrity endorsements. Interestingly, the first were actually in the 1920 election. It was
Hubert Humphrey running. That's all I want to know.
In 1920 film stars, it was still silent films. They weren't talkies yet. Mary Pickford and Al Jolson endorsed Warren G. Harding, and that was actually considered to be very beneficial, which is really fascinating. Yeah. In 2008, Oprah endorsed Barack Obama, and there were some academics who did like a serious study from the University of Maryland and Northwestern, and they found that it was probably responsible for more than 1 million votes for Obama. And the reason is that Oprah was perceived as nonpartisan, non-political. She was a registered independent. She hadn't endorsed a candidate before, and it really helped Obama with women who might have been inclined to support Hillary Clinton otherwise in the primaries. In 2016, Hillary Clinton got a lot of the same celebrity endorsements that Obama had, but in some ways they kind of backfired because Hillary Clinton was seen as sort of the elite. But Trump, Trump was kind of punk. He didn't have the.
I can't believe you just said that, James. My brain just exploded.
So, obviously this year the coolness factor is on Kamala's side already. We had Charlie XCX tweet Kamala is brat, and the Harris campaign endorsed that. So can
I ask what was it like in the spin room and the reporters room when the Taylor Swift endorsement came the other night? Because it did come shortly after the debate. We were like fact checking it to make sure it was real and not fake, and then we were like, this is actually breaking news to share with our audience. Did you learn about it in the spin room?
I learned about it from you.
Oh,
you broke the news to me as we were ending our live show, our live post show. But I believe it did bring a little bit of energy from some of the clips that I saw on the other side of the spin room. I know the governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro, did point out that Swift is a Pennsylvania native.
Berks County.
Right. That's what he said. And I think that Democrats were like, okay, this is the icing on the cake tonight. I think Republicans downplay it a little bit. I know J.D. Vance did also make some comments yesterday about, they respect her as a musician. But, all of this is in the voters' hands. But yeah, to Jane, I'm really interested in the silent actors who really affected. I don't know what their social media game was at that time. It was word of mouth. It was a whisper campaign.
Well, we actually have some family spoons these are not high quality family spoons that have like Mary Pickford on the
wow,
what's it called, handle?
Yeah,
and other old. They're my grandmother's other. They're like nickel plated.
So
other silent film actors. So maybe they just gave out spoons.
Maybe we all need hobbies, but I'm thinking like tonight I want to go down this rabbit hole as well and find out how did they get their message out? Yeah. How did people learn who they wanted to vote for at that time?
Next week's podcast will be entirely about the 1920 election. We're just going to go real deep. Don't worry, viewers. So there's a couple of things. I totally went down this celebrity rabbit hole. Trump, obviously, he got Kid Rock, Roseanne, Amber Rose, John Voight, Russell Brand. I actually reached out to a Harris campaign operative and said, who's been most helpful? And he said that Jeff Bridges was actually very helpful because he was in The Big Lebowski, and there was that Dudes for Harris Zoom call. And they were obviously, the Harris folks are super excited about Taylor Swift, and but it was in terms of there is a gender gap, and in terms of like consolidating Democratic support. Also, it's worth pointing out celebrity unendorsements can have a big impact. You think about George Clooney's op-ed saying that Biden should drop out. That had far more impact than Clooney holding a fundraiser for Biden in the first place.
Which is to remind people that's why he felt like compelled, because he had held this fundraiser. He'd been with Biden. So it's not like he just pulled it out of the air. He had some time with the president, and his analysis after that was, and so it packed a real punch. Yeah. So it seems like the newness fact, like you get like one shot to be brand new at this, right? So if you stay politically neutral and then come out in support of someone, it seems like Oprah had done, like you said, back in 2008. Like I think about Eva Longoria. We all know that she's going to support Democrats. Right. She's part of the DNC operation, and at the convention. And we know that there are a handful of Republican celebrities who will just sort of always be on hand, always chipping in, and they just don't have as much of a impact. Now they can be deployed and mobilized to be very useful in selective ways. But who are the gets? Like who do people want?
So there's actually been polling on this. There's been a range of polling. People
of like dream celebrity
endorsements. And it's you have to, as a pollster, you have to ask about it in a sneaky way, because no one wants to admit that someone else's view is like swaying them, that they're being told how to vote. So if you just, if you say, does Taylor Swift's endorsement make you more or less likely to vote for Kamala Harris? Only 2% of people are going to say yes. So you have to kind of take that in mind. But when you ask about it different ways, and you ask, about favorability, and with the ones that actually really pop,
Charlie Chaplin.
Kevin Hart, who did speak at the DNC, and it was because he tests really well. He reaches a demographic Harris is trying to get. He's the comedian. Timothy Chalamet actually tested really high. The one that really surprised me that was like the biggest was Sandra Bullock. Because she's sort of the girl next door. She's relatable. People identify with her character. She's not seen as political. The other two that really popped were Serena Williams, the tennis star, and Viola Davis. But to our point about how people can still be helpful even if they're seen as political, there's a lot of evidence of people getting folks to register. Like Ariana Grande got a lot of people to register to vote. She's like had all these tables at her concerts. So did Billie Eilish, and Trevor Noah on The Daily Show. When he was hosting it, he was pushing people to go register, and that there was actually like data showing that it prompted people to sign up. So it's not necessarily like that person is going to, he's saying go vote for Kamala Harris, but it does bring people into the process.
Yeah. I'd also say that it probably brings enthusiasm, Voter registration is a very good way to see if people are enthusiastic about a race. We've been, covering this for the last year and a half. And the first half, we saw that people just weren't, 75% of this cycle, we saw people were not really enthusiastic. They weren't interested in voting. Those who were going to vote were doing so in a way that was kind of, just I'm doing this as my civic duty. But having someone, of the stature of Swift or any of the other names, I could see people saying, well, if they're in the game, I guess I'll get interested too.
Yeah.
I did wonder why Trump didn't have Jason Aldean perform at the RNC, because Jason Aldean was there. He was sitting near Trump, next to Trump in like the friends and family booth, but didn't actually perform. So I wondered about some of the choices at the RNC about having celebrity splash. But as you said, it can also backfire because there was definitely an era of the Obama years where they were it was too cool. The White House Correspondents Center was like all celebrities, right? Like regular journalists couldn't get tickets. And it does create this like elite feeling. Right. And it's like a fine line between being part of the winning team and feeling left out. I guess we'll see if Kamala Harris will enter into her presidential era.
Oh!
All right. Well, thank you so much to both of you for playing along with the celebrity guessing game. We'll watch to see if these endorsements really do make a difference. And perhaps the biggest thing will be registering people to vote, whichever, side of the political spectrum you're on. If it gets people more motivated and involved, that may have a lasting impact beyond even this election. Well, that's all for Sidebar today. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and a huge thanks, as always, to James, Rhonda, and Robin Givhan. A reminder that you can watch us on YouTube. Just look for The Washington Post, and you can hear us on your favorite podcast app. We drop every Thursday, so we'll see you next week.